Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today is 28th of February, 2025. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So, some big news out of the Ethereum Foundation over the last couple of days. So you probably would have seen this on Twitter already. This is something that a lot of people have been talking about for the last couple of months, but Aya from the Ethereum Foundation, so she's the executive director there, has announced that she's actually transitioning from being the executive director into a new role as president of the Ethereum Foundation. Now, there is a statement you can read. I'll link it in the blog post. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to check out. But I think the TLDR of this is that AR is moving from, is moving from the executive director position to the president position, and it's a different set of duties. I think people were confused about what a president actually does and what the executive director actually does. A lot of people don't seem to know what defines these roles. Broadly speaking, I would say that a president has more to do with the bureaucracy internally, like basically the day-to-day kind of admin stuff of the internal organization, whereas the executive director is more like someone who sets the overall vision and mission for the entire, foundation and coordinates around that, and is a public-facing figure as well. They can choose to be public or not, but in a lot of times they are a public-facing figure. They're basically the face of the foundation there. At least that's my understanding. And it is different. It can vary from foundation to foundation. It's not like there's a strict rule in place that says that you have to be this or have to be that. But I think that this basically sends the, message to the ecosystem that the EF is doing a big shakeup of its leadership. I mean, there has been other announcements that have been made over the last couple of months here, but there isn't a new executive director yet. So no one's been announced for that position yet. I think at this point in time, I would say that the odds of Danny Ryan becoming the new executive director are quite low, if not zero, just because I feel like we would have heard about it by now. But at the same time, I was thinking about it more myself and about where Danny Ryan would be best fit in the ecosystem, because, I mean, he's a friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. I've followed his work for a very long time, and I was just thinking the other day that I feel like a man of his talents, so to speak, would probably have a better and more, a bigger impact somewhere else. Maybe not at the Ethereum Foundation, depending on what he wants to do himself as well. I think that his talents might be used in a better way somewhere else. But in terms of who I can imagine stepping into the executive director position at the Ethereum Foundation, I don't know off the top of my head. Like, there are good candidates out there, I believe, but I'm not sure. Maybe they promote from within. I don't know if that's something that they want to do. I don't know if that's something that the community would like. But maybe they promote from within, which they have done for the other leadership positions, or maybe they go out and find someone that maybe isn't even in crypto. Maybe they go and find someone who is really hungry, wants to get involved with the ecosystem, has probably a nice understanding of crypto and a decent understanding of it, but comes with fresh new ideas from some other world, maybe from like the AI world or from just the tech world in general. I don't know. We'll have to see. I've got no additional information to that. This is all just me speculating. So we'll have to see who ends up becoming the new executive director of the EF. I'm sure the announcement's coming soon. I doubt they're going to wait very long from when this announcement was made, which was 2 days ago now. So this was made 2 days ago. We maybe even get something next week. We'll have to see. I don't know. I don't have any advanced knowledge of these sorts of things. As you guys know, I don't work for the Ethereum Foundation. It's funny because a lot of people think I work for the Ethereum Foundation. I don't. I never have. As you guys know, I'm an independent guy. I like what I do within the ecosystem. But hey, we'll have to see how that all shakes out there. Alright, so another big piece of news from the last few days was that the Holesky testnet went through its Pectra upgrade, and unfortunately, it didn't go as planned. And you know what the funny thing is that it didn't go as planned, not because of any bugs within like the Pectra EIPs themselves, but because of a silly bug that affected the majority of the clients, which TLDR basically meant that the chain ended up not from what I know, it didn't finalize on a bad chain, but what ended up happening was that the bug caused the chain split, and the minority chain was actually the valid chain, and that meant that the validators that were on the majority chain, that was not the chain that was valid by view of the rules of the network, essentially. So they were on the I guess the bugged chain, which has resulted in a bunch of interesting outcomes within the testnet here. So as I said, this wasn't an issue with Pectra itself, so I don't think this is actually going to delay the Sepolia fork. I don't think it's going to delay the mainnet fork. Maybe it does by like a week or two, but I don't see it delaying anything that much because of the fact that, as I said, it wasn't an issue with any of the Pectra EIPs. It was an issue with the deposit contract not being included properly across the clients here, the deposit contract address, which is funny because it's like the edgiest of edge cases. I was actually reading about this, and someone said that the reason why this wasn't caught on DevNets is, I can't remember the exact reason, but it's because it doesn't actually apply to DevNets. So the funny thing is that like we couldn't even test for it on DevNets, and then we did it on a testnet, and then this bug came up, and it was such a simple thing that is just very easy to miss, but it did unfortunately lead to some pretty drastic consequences and pretty dire consequences for the Holesky testnet, which ended up being revived. So there was like mass slashing events to basically get the validators on that kind of majority chain to essentially slash them off that because they're on the bad chain, right? And get them to come over to the minority chain and kind of re-enter as part of that there and get Holesky basically live again and finalizing again there. But it has been extremely messy. Tim Biker has a great thread summarizing all of this. If you want to check it out, I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you. But also on top of this, I think that there was a bit of comments about this. People saying, this is really bad, right? This is, what if this happened on mainnet? This would be catastrophic. And I kind of agree with that to an extent, is that like, if it happened on mainnet, it'd be catastrophic. But as far as I know, this particular bug couldn't happen on mainnet. I can't remember the exact reason. I've read so much about this and it's just all jumbled in my head right now. But I'm going to link these threads for you guys to read because it's got more information here. But it does beg the question of like, if there was a chain breaking bug that happened on mainnet where essentially the majority is on the wrong chain and the minority is on the correct chain, how do we deal with that, right? Because no matter, especially if it gets finalized, like how do we deal with that? Because no matter which way you look at it, someone's going to get hurt, someone's going to get wrecked, and then through no fault of their own, because if it's the, I guess, developer's fault because they introduced a bug or something like that, then the community would have to come together and socially coordinate around this. So what this Holesky kind of incident has done is basically been a nice war game for all the core developers and researchers to see how the network reacts to these sorts of things, to see how they can actually go about incident response if this was to happen on mainnet, and basically tightening things around testing for these really just weird edge cases, because it's always the edge cases that get you, because you can test for so many things. But like I remember there was there's this thing in like when I was working in cybersecurity, they always said, there's the known knowns, there's the known unknowns, and then there's the unknown unknowns. So essentially you don't know what you don't know, right? So I think this bug was essentially an unknown unknown because no one had really thought of it. No one had really considered it, at least from what I saw. And now that it's been, I guess, like, now that it's happened, this is something that they'll obviously consider going forward. And Phil put out a good tweet here about this. He works on Lodestar as part of ChainSafe. Lodestar is a consensus layer client. He said, we're not trying to save Holesky because this is something we can replicate on mainnet as disaster mitigation. Everything that they're doing for Holesky is for science. We haven't been able to test a massive slashing at this scale, nor revive a chain from multiple invalid/valid forks. Some of us didn't even know how some of our clients will handle the chaos. This exercise has and will allow us to create more robust software for Ethereum, expect new APIs, flags, and maybe even some spec changes that will benefit from the chaos, which I think is really cool because, as Phil said here, this is not exactly something that you want to wargame on mainnet because of the fact that there is actual consequences. On a testnet, it's different. Like, no one cares. I mean, people care, but like, you're not losing money on a testnet. Whereas on mainnet, there is vast consequences, monetary, financial consequences for stuff like this. And I think those consequences, especially if it's something as potentially big as this, where you have to do like mass slashing to get the chain back online and so many people end up losing money, or you try to do some kind of socially coordinated thing where you basically, I'm just thinking out loud here, but you could technically slash everyone and then mint ETH again and give that ETH to those people that were on the wrong fork through no fault of their own, in order to make them whole again. But you see how messy this gets and how quickly it gets very messy. Like that would be quite an insane thing to do. And I'm just saying it because it's an option, right? There's always a million different options that you can go down and different paths you can go down, but we don't want to be invoking that. So obviously we want to, with core development and core research, we want to be moving as fast as we can. But I've said this plenty of times on the Refuel, there's basically a limit to that, because you have to consider the security implications here. You have to consider the stability implications of the network, especially a network like Ethereum, which is home to so much and such a diversified set of use cases and ecosystem participants and stakeholders. It's just not something that we can risk happening on mainnet. That's why we do so much testing, so many dev nets. We do the test nets first, then we go to mainnet, but it also speaks to what I think I've been saying on the Refuel the last couple of months, and what the core devs and researchers have been talking about a lot, is separating out things. So essentially, because we want to move fast in certain areas of the protocol, for example, we want to move really fast with scaling up blobs, right? We want to do peer DAS, we want to have as many blobs as possible in the network. So let's like separate that out from the other stuff. Let's separate that out from EPBS and Fossil and the Verkle tree stuff and other parts of the roadmap, right? And that's what it seems like they're trying to do at this stage. It really does seem like they're trying to separate things out so that the user-facing stuff gets priority. The stuff that really impacts the network in terms of for its users gets priority, which is something like blobs, and then other things that also have impacts on the network and users, but I guess like maybe secondary to scale, such as Fossil, such as EPBS, and the other things that I mentioned. They would come later, and they would be considered less critical than scaling. So it's all part of that conversation there. But that's basically the I guess, summary of what happened with Holesky. As I said, I don't foresee this resulting in any kind of like long delays for Pectra or anything like that. Maybe there's like a 1 to 2 week delay or something. But I think at this point in time, it doesn't really matter, because as I said, like the core devs have already moved on to essentially, trying to finalize the Fusaka spec so that we can get peer DAS and EOF delivered as well as fast as possible. They're thinking about how to do blob scaling faster and all that sorts of stuff. So this is something that obviously Pectra we want to have on the network, but it's not like it's something that is very, very urgent right now. Pectra does include a blob count increase, but it's not something that's absolutely critical, or else everything's going to go to shit. No, especially with the market the way it is, right? It's very bearish right now. It seems like there's a little bit of leeway here in terms of timelines there. Not an excuse to slow down, mind you, but if doing a 1 or 2 week delay is needed to make sure that we're doing it the right way, then I think that we should be all for that. All right, just another quick thing I wanted to highlight here is, as you guys know, that after Pectra goes live, there is a big appetite to increase the L1 gas limit as much as we can. Right now, it's at 36 million. Ben Adams here from the Nethermind team wants to increase the Holesky gas limit to 60 million after Pectra goes live on their network. Obviously, once the network's stable again from the I guess reviving it's going through right now, this will hopefully happen there. But the logic is basically, do it on the test nets early, and then do it on mainnet after Pectra goes live, and essentially get us up to 100 million if we can as well. Because I think 60 million is, it's a conservative target. We want to go higher than that. Imagine if we can get to 100 million by end of this year or by Q1 next year. That would be really, really cool. Just keep scaling up the L1 alongside the L2 with blobs, and make sure that we can stay, obviously, the Ethereum ecosystem stays competitive on the scale front, and make sure that builders and users know that Ethereum is going to keep scaling into the future there. All right, just wanted to highlight this tweet from Greg here. So essentially, I was speaking before about the Ethereum Foundation and about how everyone wanted, Danny Ryan to be the head of the EF. And obviously, Danny Ryan is awesome, he's great, but he's not the only awesome and great person in Ethereum. And Greg actually highlights a bunch of people here. It's not an exhaustive list, but he highlights a bunch of people here across the different areas of Ethereum. And most of these people, if not all of them, I think work within the Ethereum Foundation. But you have people like Josh here, Josh Rudolph, who's doing a lot of things with layer 2 interoperability. I've been highlighting his work on the Refuel, so he's doing that, and he's acting as like the Danny Ryan, the leader, the coordinator of that effort. Then you have DevOps and validators, which is Parathosh, who have also highlighted a lot on the Refuel, does a lot of really great work on that front. Current protocol, Tim Byko, you guys know he's like the main coordinator of the all core devs. So on the Solidity side here, you have Alex, who's been around for a very long time actually, and has been doing a lot of great work for Solidity. Future protocol stuff, you've got Justin Drake working on things like based rollups, obviously working on issuance stuff as well, native rollups, even L2 interoperability, right? Lots of great stuff there. Funding of the all-core developers through things like the Protocol Guild. Trent Van Epps works on that. I mean, I've talked about the Protocol Guild countless times. And then Moon Math and beyond with Vitalik. I mean, yeah, Vitalik's just across like everything on the core protocol in terms of research and even outside of that. And there's also a lot of other people that are focusing on different things within the Ethereum Foundation too that Greg talks about and other people replied to his tweet with. So I'll just link this tweet in the YouTube description below. But my overall point here is that, and this is what Greg was trying to say in his tweet as well, you know, Ethereum is too big for just one leader. We've got many, many different leaders here, and that's actually incredibly healthy. We don't just want one leader as part of one kind of entity dictating what's going on with Ethereum. We want many leaders as part of many different initiatives and entities doing things within the Ethereum ecosystem, and I think we have that, and I think that's going to keep growing over time because you do really have the opportunity to do whatever you want in Ethereum. No one's telling you what you can and can't do. No one's stopping you. It is a truly decentralized ecosystem. So if you want to start being the the lead on some new effort, you can go do that. Get some people around you, drum up some support for it, even possibly get funding from things like the Ethereum Foundation, and you can go and do that there. All right, so we have a post-mortem on that ByBit hack from the other day. So it ended up being that it wasn't ByBit themselves that were exploited. It was actually the safe multi-sig front end that was exploited. So the TLDR is that the Lazarus group, so the North Korean APT or Advanced Persistent Threat group, were able to modify the official website of Safe to inject some malicious code that targeted ByBit actually. So it wasn't a kind of like, there's different terms for this, but it wasn't them casting a wide net here. It was literally like a spear phishing thing where they're like, okay, we're going to target specifically ByBit. We know they use the safe wallet interface, so we're gonna change it by kind of exploiting it there, changing it, and then that's how they were able to drain ByBit's funds here. Now, this is obviously quite scary, and I do want to preface this by saying that nothing's wrong with the safe smart contracts. So the safe multi-sig smart contracts, as far as I know, are completely fine. There's no known exploits in them. Nothing's been exploited there, but this is like a front end attack, right? And I've talked a lot in the past about front ends and how they are a central point of failure for a lot of reasons, but I think there's multiple angles you can come at this from. One is that it's scary because like a lot of people use Safe, and if this was a general exploit on the Safe front end, it could have led to a lot of losses from a lot of different people. But I think that the reason why it was targeted at ByBit was because you can imagine that maybe someone moving a small amount of money around was to notice this, right, on the front end, and they would alert the Safe team, and then it would get patched pretty quickly. Whereas if you only target ByBit, essentially what you're doing is making sure that the target you're going after is the only one that can trigger this, and also you're going after a target for a specific reason. In this case, because you know they have $1.5 billion worth of ETH that you can steal from them, right? So that's obviously one aspect to it. The other aspect is that, like, if I don't know what ByBit's internal security practices look like, I will commend them a lot on their incident response. So their incident response should actually be studied at, by people in different kind of universities for how good it was and how well it was conducted there. But I think that there's a couple of things here. So as I said, I don't know what ByBit's internal security procedures look like, but I think the responsibility still lies with ByBit here over Safe. Yes, of course, the Safe team should have been better at securing their front end. Like, there's obviously blame to be laid there. But if you're moving $1.5 billion worth of money around, whether it's ETH or whatever, you think that there'd be a much more stringent and lengthy process to do that, and you'd think that they wouldn't be using a third-party front end to do this. As far as I know, you can actually run the Safe front end locally, or you can interact with the contracts directly yourself. So for an organization that is managing other people's money, that has the money to pay the top security people, the top operations people, the fact that they were able to get exploited by this, or the fact they're able to get essentially, spearphished by this, speaks to the fact that they don't have the controls in place that they should have internally. So as I said, I still think that the blame pretty much lies almost entirely on ByBit for this, because their existing processes shouldn't be like this, at least from the outside looking in. They should have much more stringent processes on this. And I think that the other exchanges do. Like, for example, Coinbase, as far as I know, has never been hacked, ever. And they've been around for a very long time. And they have more customers than anyone else, basically. Or at least maybe not more customers because Binance has more, but Binance I think only got hacked once in the past, and I don't know if I can't remember what the hack was exactly. I don't think it was on their cold storage. It was on some hot wallets, but basically like these big exchanges, they take security extremely seriously, especially Coinbase. Coinbase's security is would be top notch here, but I think when you're operating a centralized exchange, you essentially need to always default to, as part of your security apparatus, you need to default to, okay, I'm going to get targeted by nation states because you are, right? Like you're a massive honeypot for nation states, and they know that they can steal this crypto and then wash it in a million different ways. And then once it's gone, it's gone. There's not really many ways to recover it. You can recover some here and there, but for something like ETH or BTC, no one's going to blacklist these addresses except the centralized exchanges. Like, you're not going to be able to blacklist it on chain, right? And you can do a lot of different things on chain with these assets, and then you can, as I said, like wash them through different means and launder them through different means. So I think as an exchange, you have to have that at the top of your list there. So I would say that I still personally put the responsibility on ByBit, but as I said, they had a killer incident response here, and they actually made everyone whole. So they've done a great job there. As I said, I commend them on this, but it still doesn't take away from the fact that it's a huge, obviously, lesson for them to be much more strict with their internal security posture. And it's also a lesson to everyone in crypto that just because you're using a third-party front end doesn't mean, a trusted front end doesn't mean that it is secure against attacks. Because as I said, this could happen to anyone. This could have been a general exploit. And imagine if you were using a safe multi-sig here, and you went to the website and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to do a transaction from my wallet. Everything looks good. I'm going to initiate this, and then your funds were drained. You were thinking you actually are on the legit website, and you're thinking everything's legit, and then you lose your money like that. So I think it speaks to the fact that we need more decentralized front ends for sure, that ones that can't be changed, like immutable front ends, decentralized immutable front ends. We need easier to run local front ends. So being able to run the safe front end locally should be much easier and much more accessible for people. And we also need to understand as an industry, as I said, that these nation state actors are targeting the honeypots. Like they're targeting everyone. So you need to be much more, I guess, security aware if you're doing things like self-custody. And there's always obviously a risk of custodying your assets with centralized exchanges, as was evidenced by ByBit here. But if you're doing that, you need to understand those risks, and you need to, if you're going to do it, you should only do it with reputable exchanges. And I know that it's sometimes hard to know what's reputable and what's not, but I think at this point, it's pretty safe to say that Coinbase is extremely reputable in terms of, I guess, like using and storing your funds there. Your biggest risk with Coinbase, I would say, is the fact that they can just arbitrarily freeze your account, and it can take a while to get it back for whatever reason. I would say that's the biggest risk. The risk of it getting hacked or drained or anything like that is very small. There's always a risk there of that, but it's very small. I would say Binance is quite legit too. I think I've never heard of anyone really losing funds in a Binance exploit or anything like that, unless they were somehow phished by giving their account up or something like that. So, but Binance is also, I mean, you guys know my opinion on Binance, right? Historically, they've been quite dodgy. So I wouldn't trust my funds there. But if you're talking about like, if you had to store your funds on an exchange, yeah, I would say like, Coinbase, Kraken, Binance, maybe. I mean, I don't know of much others. And you also have to be aware that a lot of the other services that offer crypto custody and trading, they actually use third parties like Coinbase to custody. So you would want to read who they actually use for custody. Are they doing it themselves, or are they using a third party? And that's just custodying with third parties. Obviously, I still recommend self-custody above all of that, but I understand that a lot of people aren't comfortable with that. I understand that something like this makes people even more uncomfortable. The fact that a multi-sig that they thought was extremely secure can be compromised like this. As I said, it wasn't the smart contracts themselves that were compromised. It was the front end. But hey, 99% of people are using the safe multi-sig front end. They're not using their own front end. They're not running it locally. I'll be the first to admit that I don't run it locally either. I should, honestly, but I actually didn't even know that you could. I honestly thought that you couldn't, and I think someone in the Daily Gwei Discord channel linked it to me saying that you could, but it was a bit of a involved process there. But it just needs to be super easy. So you can imagine it becoming just like a very easy thing that you can download locally and then run it locally on your own machine. A few clicks, and that's all it really takes. But yeah, I think that when it comes to these kind of products, it's also against the best interest of the product itself, because, for example, the front end is where these products commercialize. So if they let everyone run their front end locally, they can't commercialize it as much, and it becomes a revenue drain on them rather than a revenue generator. So I understand that as well. But hey, if you want to have everyone trusting your front end, you better make sure that things locked down really tight and secured really tight, because this is a failure on Safe's behalf as well, that they didn't lock down their front end to the point where this couldn't happen. So yeah, that's the kind of I guess like TLDR there on all of that. You can go read the post that Safe put out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. There's more details in that. All right, so just something I wanted to highlight here from the OP Labs team. So they introduced a feature a while ago in a beta fashion, which was the ability to set a custom gas token if you were an OP stack chain. So I think that this feature was not needed to begin with, but they introduced it because they wanted to obviously add more flexibility to OP stack chains. But they've now deprecated this feature, and I think this is a really good decision because, in all honesty, the gas ticker is ETH, and it should just be ETH. There is abstractions you can do at like the interface and wallet level, where essentially you say, okay, well, you can pay for your gas fees in stablecoins, and then in the background it gets converted to ETH, gets paid in ETH on Optimism or Base or Arbitrum or whatever it is, and then it gets paid down as ETH to Layer 1 Ethereum as well. I think that just makes it easier from an accounting perspective. Obviously, ETH is incredibly liquid, so it's no problems there with liquidity, and it makes it simpler for users as well. So and it reinforces ETH's use as a monetary kind of unit within the Ethereum economy outside of Ethereum L1, right? In the Ethereum L2s and L3s or whatever, what have you there. So I'm glad that their OP stack has done this, and I think this should be the standard across all the L2s. They should just use ETH, and then you can abstract it away if you need to at the interface layer. You can do gas sponsorship. You can do paymasters, stuff like that. That's fine. But under the hood, it should always be ETH. Just for, as I said, for the reasons I just outlined, and also just to reinforce ETH as the money within the Ethereum economy. All right, so Base has a pretty major upgrade coming soon that's going to reduce the effective block time from 2 seconds down to 200 milliseconds. So it's live on testnet right now and coming to mainnet in Q2, and it's called Flash Blocks. So I believe this is a product from Flashbots. It enables sub blocks issued by the block builder to be streamed to nodes every 200 milliseconds, allowing for early confirmation times with native revert protection. And you can learn more about it in this GitHub repo. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so there. But this is really cool, I think, for a number of different reasons. Arbitrum 1 is already at this, so it's great to see Base getting there, and I guess like they're using a different product to what Arbitrum is using here. But as I've said before, I think 1 second or below is what you want to be targeting, but anything kind of, 2 seconds and below is what you want to be targeting, but anything under 1 second is just gravy. I think for most end users, they're going to think, well, you know, if it takes a second for my transaction to confirm, that's fine. Like, I don't need it to confirm in 200 milliseconds. But if you're confirming it in 200 milliseconds, it just once again steps up that user experience to the point of like it feels basically instant. And yes, you're not going to really notice the difference between 200 milliseconds and 1 second, unless you're like measuring it yourself, but it, I guess, like gives that feel to the chain being faster, because it is 800 milliseconds faster than between 1 second and 200 milliseconds here. But it also means that it's not just for end users, it's also for like all the bots operating on the network. They now have a faster way to get their transactions included. They can do more efficient arbitrage and stuff like that, which gets paid, I guess, like not paid down to the user, but it kind of gets trickled down to the user in terms of their user experience with different liquidity pools and different parts of DeFi and stuff like that. And the whole chain just becomes more efficient here. So I'm just really happy to see this. I'm really happy to see that Base is doing this, because I think that the standard needs to be like 1 second or below. 2 seconds is, I mean, it's okay, but it's probably too much. If we can set the standard to 1 second or below, that'd be great. And then there's also other L2s that aren't live yet that are working on getting it down as much as possible, like Mega ETH, for example. And I've showed a demo of what this looks like. They want to get it down to basically 10 millisecond block times, I think, or even less than that. I think 1 millisecond they were trying to target here in order to basically make a fully on-chain game viable, where essentially you won't be feeling the latency of a transaction. Like, everything can be a transaction, but you won't be feeling it in the block times, because you can imagine if everything is a transaction and transaction times or block times are 1 second, then it's going to be like because you do feel that in a video game, right? Like there's a reason why ping is measured in milliseconds, and if you have like for example, if you're playing like an FPS game and playing multiplayer, honestly, ideally you want like 20 ms, 20 ping essentially. You want things happening very, very quickly, very, very snappy. But then if it goes above that, you actually feel it. Like you feel it quite early on as well. And then if it's like 1 second, you are definitely feeling that, because every time you click your mouse button to fire your weapon, you've got to wait 1 second essentially for that action to happen, and then it just ruins the whole experience. So they're targeting things like that, those kinds of use cases. But for DeFi, for like sending stable coins to people, sending ETH to people, that sort of stuff, like it doesn't need that, right? That definitely doesn't need that. And 1 second or less is totally fine for those sorts of things. And it's obviously still a huge step up above TradFi there. But anyway, you can go check all of this out for yourself. Link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, last couple of things here. So GrowThePie now has a new application level metrics section of their website. So these are tools for users and builders to compare metrics across apps and see the top gainers and losers, search your favorite apps and filter by chain. And there's detailed metrics and charts when you click into applications. So you can go to growthepie.xyz/applications and see this for yourself. But I'll also link it in the YouTube description below. I think this is great because I think there needs to be more of a focus on applications. Honestly, we've focused a lot on infrastructure over a long time in crypto. We focused a lot on certain applications like DeFi, but it's bigger than that. Like obviously DeFi is probably the biggest use case we have within crypto, and you can actually see that in the metrics here. But you can actually, I believe GrowThePie wants to be able to track like every type of application here, and then you can go in here and you can see things like, if I was to click into Uniswap, for example, you can see things like transaction count. You can see where the contracts are living, like on Base and Arbitrum and things like that, over different time frames, and where most of the activity is happening, so on and so forth. In terms of transaction count and more, like you can scroll down and see similar applications as well to Uniswap. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. More stuff's going to be added. Just figured it was worth highlighting for you guys, so you can go check that out there. And last up here, L2Beat has introduced something called DA throughput on their website. So essentially, you can see the throughput of different DA layers or data availability layers on the L2Beat website now. Now, there's only 3 that they're tracking right now. It's Celestia, Ethereum with its blobs, and Avail, which is a DA layer as well there. And you can see here that there's capacity used versus its max capacity. And I actually think this is a pretty interesting thing to pay attention to, because Celestia is a chain that's a lot more centralized than Ethereum. They've taken those trade-offs because they want to scale up faster. So they have like a max capacity of 1.3 megabits per second, and they're actually going to keep scaling that up as much as they can. And Ethereum Blobs right now has a max capacity of 0.03 megabits per second, but that capacity is pretty much all used right now. You can see it's 100%, whereas with Celestia only 23% has been used over the last day. So this is just measuring the last day, the average of the last day. And most of that has been Eclipse. So you can see here 98% of what was posted to Celestia was Eclipse, as opposed to 32% on Ethereum, which is Base, which is the largest poster. So not only does Ethereum Blobs have much more of a diversity in usage, it's also at capacity. Yes, because it's more limited. But the thing is that I actually like that we don't, basically front load the space too much, because if you front load it so much and then it doesn't get filled for a very long time, you're essentially subsidizing something for nothing, right? And it creates just too much space. So I like that there's like a staggered approach here from Ethereum. I do think that obviously with us adding blobs, we should be adding blobs more aggressively, but that's only because I think that the blob usage is just going to keep going up. It's going to keep going up massively from here. On Ethereum, and obviously like Ethereum's max capacity is way less than Celestia's right now, and I would love it if chains like Eclipse could settle to Ethereum Blobs instead of Celestia, because it keeps it within the Ethereum family here, and they get to become a full roll-up. But they can't right now, because even though they're not near max capacity on Celestia, their past day average is 0.3 megabits per second. Ethereum's past day average throughput is 0.03 megabits per second. So Celestia is still doing 10 times more, even though they're not at capacity, and that's because of the fact that Eclipse posts a lot of blobs, right? But I'd love for them, or post a lot of data, I should say. I'd love for them to post that data to Ethereum, but it's on us to keep scaling blobs up here and make sure that we can have that capacity there for these other chains. But I think on that note, that's going to be it for today. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all on Monday. Thanks, everyone.